Good afternoon and welcome to the Institute of World Politics. For those of you who are new, IWP is a graduate school of national security and international affairs. We have 5 master's degree programs, 18 certificates of study, and a new doctoral program. We also offer the opportunity to take a single course without having to pay an entire semester's worth of tuition costs. One can also audit such a course at much less cost. If you are interested in learning more about us, please feel free to speak to one of our staff at the conclusion of this event. Franak Viačorka is the Vice President of the Digital Communication Network. He concurrently works at the Consultant for U.S. Agency for Global Media, and he is the Creative Director of Radio for Europe, Belarus Service. Mr. Viačorka is a frequent speaker and advocate for democracy and personal freedom in post-Soviet countries. An expert in Russian disinformation, he recently published research on the Kremlin-backed media, Russian Orthodox Church, and think tanks as the Kremlin's soft power. In 2014, after the Ukrainian Revolution of Dignity, he launched a nationwide campaign promoting the national identity of Belarus. Before that, he served as a leader of the youth wing of the Belarusian Popular Front, BNF. His work in Belarus has been chronicled by documentary filmmakers and recognized by many international organizations, including the National Endowment for Democracy, Freedom House, and Open Society Foundations. Mr. Viačorka was the first Václav Havel Fellow for Radio for Europe under Havel's personal recommendation. Mr. Viačorka has earned degrees from American University in Washington, D.C. and Warsaw University in Poland, and he also studied at Georgetown University and European Humanities University. Please join me in welcoming our speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm very glad to be here and thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. So today I'm going to speak about Belarus, about the current events, about the last week, about what will happen if Russia will take over. Please prepare your questions. I think we'll have 20-25 minutes. I will be happy to address them. But I will begin with a disclaimer that I think nobody really understands what is going on there and behind the scenes. So all the observations and all the ideas can be only speculations. So today we'll be given lesser numbers than usually I'm given during the lectures and more my personal understanding of the processes and trends inside. So why we speak today about it? We speak because American ambassador will come back, and that's the result of the series of events, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes unclear what, and also because of the recent scandal, conflict, competition between the Russian government and Belarus government related to the future of the Union State, Belarus and Russian Union State. So everything began last December. All the Russian media suddenly began addressing the question, so what happened to the Union State? Why we are still living separately? They played with these tax maneuvers, they were expected to get compensation for cheaper hydrocarbons that Belarus received from Russia for many years. Later, Lukashenko said that you will receive nothing from us because we have pride. Later, Ambassador Babic began the large tour around Belarusian cities, claiming that Belarus is a Russian territory. Next few months, there was some conversation about can Babic be the politician in Belarus, and Babic was fired and left his post in Minsk. There were speculation in media that it's not just like this, it's not because Lukashenko was angry with Babic, Russian ambassador in Belarus, but because there was some other deal made behind the scenes. And the latest developments are plans on deeper integration leaked to the Russian newspaper Kommersant a few days ago, and Belarus lifted the number of embassy diplomats of the United States and promised to allow American ambassador to to come back to Minsk. So that's like the very short, brief overview of the latest events. I have the big hope that all these events mean that something happening, and when something happens, even if the events are chaotic, there is a chance for good forces and for right things to happen and change the trend. Because the trend for many years was not towards Belarus independence, but opposite, towards Russian dependence and control over the country. So, day before yesterday, Under Secretary of the United States visited Karappa. Karappa is the large cemetery, the place where thousands, perhaps hundreds thousands Belarusians, Poles, Lithuanians, Ukrainians, Jews were killed during Stalin purges. So this is the place, the symbol of Stalin's communist repressions in Belarus, and this is the place very often ignored by foreign diplomats. Instead of going to, for example, Bolton, former national security advisor, he didn't go to Karappa. He went to another memorial to Jewish victims during the Second World War, despite Belarusian civil society asked American and Western diplomats to visit Karappa. But Under Secretary, day before yesterday, visited this place. And this place was always ignored by Lukashenko for many, many years until recently. And this place is hated by Russian propagandists, media, and politicians because they believe that this is fake and no one was really killed there. And after this happened, another secretary put flowers near this cross. Social networks began comparing this event to 1994, when Bill Clinton legitimized this place for the first time by visiting this place when he and his wife Hillary Clinton visited Minsk for the first time. So I'm pretty optimistic because of this change and because of this hope, and that's the first time when Belarusian activists, and not only, but Belarusian mass audience, began discussing American role and American influence for Belarus culture. And I must say that according to opinion polls made in 2017-18, Belarus' attitude towards the United States improved since 1998, 1999, when the first conflict and the relationship with the United States deteriorated. Despite the fact that US embassy and public diplomacy has very limited presence in Belarus. Countries like Egypt or Afghanistan, where millions, dozens millions of dollars were invested in public diplomacy, and the relationship and attitude to the United States and Western values did not improve, and Belarus, which cost nothing, and the relationship constantly improving on both sides, societal and elites. So look at this guy. So this is the person, it's Lukashenko, president of Belarus, who is ruling the country for 25 years. He managed to balance for many, many years between West and the East. We often joke that in the winter Lukashenko is a friend of Russia, and in summer he is a friend of the West. So when he needs when he needs a new contract for gas, then he goes to Moscow. When he needs IMF and World Bank loans, he's trying to invite Western politicians and American congressmen. Basically, what attracts him on both sides? On the Western side, the pure, pragmatic, economical, financial interests. No doubts that he does not affiliate himself with Western values. For many, many years, he was trying to build in Belarus better Russia, with better roads, with better kolkhozes, with better officials, with better bureaucracy, and with, of course, better control. And and after so many years, he will not give up this model. Yes, he's trying to transform this model to make it like more efficient, more modern, funny and to pack it somehow in more or less modern way. But he doesn't give up his initial plans, values, and ideas. And he affiliates himself with Soviet glory and great Russian past for sure. And this is what he's seeking, and this is what attracts him in the East. Not only cheap prices for gas and oil, which is obviously true, but of course he still believes, I think so, as the same as he expected and hoped in 90th, to get a new position, a new role in this new political unit, a new political creation, or perhaps statehood, Belarus-Russian Union. And these discussions, conversations on Russian media, on Telegram channels about the future of Russia, what will happen to Putin, they always include Lukashenko. Sometimes Lukashenko is promised the role like the honorary president of the new Russian Belarusian state. Sometimes he is offered the role like the special prime minister when Putin will remain the president of the new statehood. But I think that Lukashenko's ambitions are remain in power, and he still invests in his popularity in Russia. So, hybrid mentality of the ruling elite, that's not a unique thing for Belarus. Many post-Soviet states, especially Central Asian dictatorships, they're trying to do that. In contrast to Azerbaijan, which managed to build a totally new system, new model. So basically Lukashenko, he perceives himself as a Soviet man, but the same time, he was pushing for many years the narrative that the Russian government betrayed the Soviet ideology. But what happened recently? New Russian ideology introduced after occupation of Crimea, it began including Soviet elements again. So before 2014, Putin allowed Solzhenitsyn's book, Archipelago Gulag, and all others in the school program. And all his narratives, they were exclusive. They just were criticizing Soviet past, repressions, and everything. But after 2014, Putin managed to create a hybrid model of Soviet and Russian things, where Soviet past was the past of the evolution from Russian Empire model to the modern Russia thing. So modern Russia includes both Soviet past and Russian Empire past. And then Lukashenko lost monopoly for this concept as the savior, unique savior of the Soviet model. So why Belarus is under threat? Why takeover is possible, and why Russian influence is so strong? So national tradition, language was included from education system, from the government, from the mass media for many years. The ruling elite didn't have strong feeling of the belonging to Belarus. Only until recently we began observing the process of Westernization of elites, when the majority of new appointees to ministerial and by-ministerial position were from the Western Belarus. And it's interesting, the majority of the new appointees, they had education in Belarusian universities. Compared to officials in 90th and beginning of 2000s, when ministers usually had Russian experience, Russian education, and usually Russian military service behind them in their biographies. So now we call it indigenization of Belarusian elites. And desovietization never happened in Belarus. And that makes this system unique in the post-Soviet space. It even didn't start. Only now we see some signals, some very small, tiny events that can be called desovietization, but it's not on the statehood level yet. So today I'll be speaking about two contradictory processes: Russification and Westernization. And when I speak about Russification, I also mean re-Sovietization. So they are not exclusive, because currently, when we speak about Russification, it includes a lot of Soviet elements, especially ideological narratives from Soviet past. When 5 years ago, Russification and all the school books, literature publications, they were speaking only about the Catherine the Great and its role for Belarus as the savior rebuilder. Now, all the Russian and pro-Russian media, they often address Stalin as another hero compared to Catherine the Great. I will give you a few examples later. So, Belarus society exists, the cultural, linguistic, and worldview of the Russian space. That is made by monopoly of the information space by Russian media and by Russian social networks primarily. Even the activization of foreign media or surrogate media like Radio Free Europe or Belsat TV on social networks, it doesn't change the fact that the majority of population use Vkontakte and Odnoklassniki, Russian social networks, which are part of Russian propagandist machine. We'll skip it. And I will begin Sovietization and Russification part from the story from Russia. Because this story was very loud and discussed in Belarus. It was discussed in Estonia, it was discussed even in Hungary, and worldwide. The professor in Udmurtia, Russian region, he burned himself. And he was an activist and promoter of the Udmurt language. And when he burned himself, he has the poster in his hands, "If my language dies tomorrow, then I'm ready to die today." And that was the action against the Russification policy in Russia. And unfortunately, the situation with Belarusian language is very similar, because despite the formal constitutional right, equal right for Belarusian language to in Belarus, it's still discriminated on the level of government officials, bureaucracy, and education system. And it was not always like this. In the beginning of the 20th century, Belarus language was dominant in the country. Almost 90% of population was speaking Belarusian. It was in schools, it was in book publishing, and it was the same in magazine and brochures. So only there were like few waves of Russification in 20th century, which we have to admit. That's the 30s, after the Karenization policy, Indigenization policy by Stalin. There was the wave of Russification of 30s, when intelligentsia of many Soviet republic was killed. And the second wave is already after 1990s, when Lukashenko came to power, and he began this Russification, re-Russification again, by eliminating basically Belarusian language in general. And for now, we have only 291 students in Belarus that have full education, all the classes taught in Belarusian language. So that's the sad truth, and that's 103 times less than in 1919, when the Soviet Union collapsed. So you can see that Russification began in Soviet time, but it continues, and it continued during Lukashenko's rule before 2014-15, when Crimea happened. And when Lukashenko, he reconsidered, for sure, his position regarding Belarus identity and language. The designer of the Russification, Sovietization, is not alive anymore, and he is from 19th century. And I think Muravyev, general governor, he described very well how Russian soft power, Russian public diplomacy should work. And many of these tools is still used. You know, you have to use bureaucracy, school, and religion, orthodoxy, And in combination with the military threat, they are given the enormous power for you to control smaller societies and neighboring countries. And Muravyov is still alive in Belarusian mentality. That's a leaflet from this year. So some activists in the regions, I don't know whom, they just put two persons on the leaflet. The first one on the left is Kastuś Kalinowski, whose remains were found recently in Vilnius on the Gediminas hill, and will be reburied in November, in the beginning of November in Vilnius. He is considered as the national hero of Belarus and used as the national hero and symbol for opposition. And the second one is Muravyov, who is ideologist and promoted by Lukashenko's ideologists and by pro-Russian organizations, Telegram channels, and media. So basically, people still, compare two heroes of 19th century. So this battle is not from today. This battle began 150 years ago, and it continues. It continues in a street protest. That's Immortal battalion. That's the action organized every year on the May 9th, Victory Day in post-Soviet countries, when Sputnik, with all pro-Russian organizations, Cossacks initiatives, they go to the streets. They have portraits of grandfathers, veterans who were participating in the Second World War. And the idea is good. It's not political, but it's always about weaponizing the idea. Besmertny Polk began as a very good idea of Russian opposition activists, actually about 10-15 years ago, close to the liberal groups that want to immortalize and commemorate the veterans. But it was used by Russian soft power as the tool in post-Soviet republic, to gather all the pro-Russian forces together. Similar to Masha and the Bear. That's another case. Masha and the Bear was not created as the Russian imperialistic power to destroy democracies and occupy Belarus, Moldova, or the United States of America. But Russia and the Bear was used in a very smart way by Russian embassies, Россотрудничество, Русский Мир foundations worldwide, because no one loves Putin. Okay, not many people love Putin. But Masha, it's like the cover, it's the beautiful mask for Russian diplomacy. And they put Masha's portraits on the Russian embassy, on the Russian cultural centers. All the events are happening with the leaflets with Masha portraits. And Masha statues are in every city. I saw it almost every city in Belarus where I visited. So Masha was weaponized and became power of the public diplomacy, the same as this Immortal battalion. And this is another guy, that's one of the opposition leaders, like from 10-15 years ago, who suddenly switched the side. He and the other 20-30 opposition leaders suddenly began attending Immortal battalion's protests, criticizing Belarusian pro-Western oppositions, and going to Orthodox church paramilitary camps, speaking to kids who are just like 15, 16 years old kids, who are attending this meetings and camps. So it's about weaponization. So every tool, even every cultural phenomenon, you can weaponize. That's another candidate to Belarusian parliament on these elections. She is a big fan of Stalin, and her main narrative at these elections, which will happen this fall, is that Belarus does not exist. So Belarus is the fake country, and she is okay, and she has supporters. And Russian organizations, they support her. Sputnik is giving tribune to her. So basically all this infrastructure created by Russia in Belarus, and not only in Belarus, it is used and it is given to these political figures. Fortunately, not so many of them are on the political landscape so far, but it doesn't mean that they will not pop up, they will not emerge next year before presidential elections. NKVD appraisal. That's another thing, and I don't know why, because NKVD was not very popular in Belarus. NKVD people were killing Belarusian men, women, children. They were coming to houses, but people's memory always forget about bad things. And suddenly, NKVD uniform became normal thing on Belarusian officers, generals, soldiers, on different parades. Older veterans and participants of Second World War began wearing this. And former Minister of Internal Affairs, Shunevich, he was happy and he was proud to wear this uniform. So suddenly we see the justification of all NKVD repressions, purges, and killings. We are just justifying the horror 30s, horrible 30s in Belarusian history. Nevertheless, we had consensus since 90s that was the worst time in Soviet Union, but now this consensus is destroyed, and then NKVD repressions are justified. And people say, yeah, perhaps they killed some good people as well, but in general, their role was positive. Another thing, that's Dzerzhinsky. Dzerzhinsky, creator of GPU, later NKVD, that's predecessor of KGB. Actually, Belarus is only one post-Soviet country which still uses KGB acronym for security, for special security service. And in regional cities of Belarus, we have opening and erecting, that's 2019, of the monuments to Dzerzhinsky Felix and also to Chekisty. Every big city, 100,000 and more population, they have the monument to Chekisty, Cheka, like KGB people. There was a performance by activists to touch them or to make photo with them. And first, the government did not react, but later they began arrested for selfies, photos, and touching these monuments. So they're some kind of sacralized by the government. So Russian influence is not only about media, not only about these Cossacks or Orthodox Church, it has also an infrastructural dimension. So basically they control communications infrastructure, and they control economical infrastructure, and they control service infrastructure. The best example, Uber Yandex, and it's not only in Belarus. We call it Yandexization of Uber. So they make deals with foreign Western companies that if Yandex is coming to the market, Western company is getting out. So Yandex basically buying exclusive right for the control of a specific territory. And all the countries where Yandex Taxi comes in post-Soviet states, there is no Uber. Or Uber is powered by Yandex, with Yandex Maps, Yandex GPS, and Yandex software. Organizations that are supporting this are much wider than on this scheme. That's my research from 2018. It should be updated, of course, because many new organizations appeared, and I'm often receiving the messages about new organizations. And interestingly, all these organizations are not supposed to live for a long time. They create organizations, and after 2-3 months, they destroy this organization. They open the website, regional website, that's sharing all these pro-Russian stereotypes and fake news about the NATO tanks in Minsk hidden in presidential administration or something like this. And later they disappear in news websites. And this strategy is not only in Belarus, it's also in the United States. We all speak here about Sputnik, about Russia today, but recently Facebook stopped almost, 16 large outlets on Facebook. Back then, it's the name of the outlet. In the now, something else. So these old outlets, each of them have like 300,000 subscribers, 500,000 subscribers, are part of Russia Today holding. But we here, we don't have opportunity to monitor all these changes, so we are losing track. We see only Sputnik Russia Today, and we feel pretty secure, because nothing bad happens. But the real war, the real competition is happening behind the scenes. It's happening on the pages of the smaller brands. And the same with this organization. Instead of financing the large, big entities, institutions, they finance many small initiatives. Some of these initiatives are one person only, but that's enough for them. And it's much easier. It makes our task to identify them almost impossible. And for Russians, it's much more easier to reach very narrow target groups in the specific villages, specific areas, or with specific interests. I will share the slides later so you can check them. We just have limited time. So main narratives. So as I mentioned, that's a mix, that's a hybrid between Soviet, Russian, and Orthodox values and ideas. So they appeal to emotions, to nostalgia. And me personally, I put a lot of effort to explain people when I meet them in Belarus, and not only that you shouldn't be nostalgic about anything. Nostalgia is used by populists around the world. Nostalgia is one of the reasons why ultra-right or pro-Russian forces are winning places in democratic parliaments. And this is why Belarusians still support Putin. They believe that Putin will bring them back мороженое за 11 копеек, ice cream for 11 копеек, and nice TV show and movies, приключения Шурика, операция A. So that's that sounds like a joke, but that's the sad truth. That then population, especially people in post-Soviet states, they forget quickly about the bad things, and they are very easily manipulated by very simple, clear, emotional promises. And and the combination of this, it makes like the cocktail. It's like this, extreme cocktail. So these two examples from Vitebsk regional page, which is getting more and more popular. I don't know who is reading this page on Vkontakte and who is subscribing, because it's nonsense. But it finds its readers as well, because it's very primitive messages. They're not connected to each other. On the left, we see Putin with a world map, Great Desert of Tolerance. South America is Venezuela. Africa is Syria. China is China. Europe is a LGBT caliphate. Yeah. So that's the vision, And of course, young Russians, young Belarusians, and young Ukrainians, Moldovans, all the people susceptible to this information, exposed to this information, of course, they are making hi ha ha. But on this subconscious level, it lives on this idea, that we can strike back. Empire strikes back. That's the main, message and narrative given to young people. And on the right, that's anti-liberal talisman. Yeah, that's like Stalin, who can coexist with Orthodox pictures, cartoons, and videos, and Stalin like superhero, like Avengers, like Robocop, or what's the name of this guy in the Iron Man? Yeah, Iron Man, who will who has his bad traits as well, but he did a lot of good stuff too, and that's enough. And who is vulnerable to this influence? Young people and seniors. That's the most difficult target groups. We don't know how to reach them, how to influence them, how to work with them. And the Russians know. Actually, ISIS knows as well. China is doing great. They launched TikTok application, which became a big thing worldwide. For 1 year, it became number 3 social network in the world, TikTok. Now it is used by people 13, 20 years old. Short videos owned by Chinese, but basically it's a Chinese spy equipment, which is gathering your personal data, using it, storing it, and filtering all the content which you're not supposed to see. So it's impossible to find Hong Kong protest videos on TikTok, It's impossible to find LGBT videos. We published one video about LGBT parade in Białystok in Poland, and this video was deleted 5 minutes later. And you cannot complain because there is no such system like complaining, for filtering content. And seniors because they spend a lot of time online. Older people, they are reading articles, they are navigating a lot. So 5 years ago it was different. But now they are the main consumers of fake news, propaganda, and disinformation. And we do not have actually normal, good, interesting, engaging content for them. When I say we, I mean international media, international surrogate media, like Voice of America, Radio Free Europe. I work for United States Agency for Global Media, and we are struggling to create content which will be popular among these people, and we didn't manage to find a way. So that's the task, and that's the problem, the challenge we have to solve together. Westernization, that's another process which is happening concurrently with the Russification. So here, most of these things are made on the societal level. And it's not Lukashenko who began allowing more, he just stopped prohibiting many things. Leo Sapieha, the Chancellor of Grand Duchy of Lithuania, his monument erected in Belarus. Gediminas, the Grand Duke of Lithuania, who is also the country which is considered in Belarusian independent historiography as our pre-state, as the country pre-state commonly with Poles, with Ukrainians, and with Lithuanians, of course. And Gediminas monument was erected in Lida 2 weeks ago. All the money were collected by people through the crowdfunding platforms. And the only thing that government did do, they did not prohibit to erect this monument. So that's a big victory, and that's the first monument to Duke of Grand Duchy of Lithuania on the territory of Belarus. Because before, government authorities are trying to ignore this part of history. According to Lukashenko, Belarus history began or in 1994 when he became the president, or in 1945 when Belarus was 1944, let's say, when Belarus was liberated from Nazism. Translation of the train station. You think, oh my God, what's the deal? That's nothing. But the thing that they changed the text from Russian language to Belarusian, for Belarus it's a big thing. It's like legitimization of Belarusian language on the train station. And Russians were upset. All the Russian media wrote about it. I don't know why they care so much about the text on the train station. But even translation of this text, it was perceived as the unfriendly act towards Kremlin and Russians. So they allowed to celebrate 100th anniversary of Belarus independence 1918, when Belarus People's Republic was announced, along with other Eastern European independences. He allowed to erect monument to Tadeusz Kościuszka. That's a Belarusian, American, Australian, Lithuanian, Polish hero. And I know there is a discussion whom he is more Polish or American or Belarusian. Of course, he's Belarusian. No, I'm joking. He's a common here, but he was born in Belarus, and his family, his roots, his relatives, his ancestors are some of them are living still in Belarus, and that's the first monument to Kościuszka on the territory of Belarus, which we are very proud of. Kościuszka, you call him Kosciuszko, something like this, but he's Kościuszka. And movie translation. I think all of you watched HBO TV show about Chernobyl. Unfortunately, they cut many scenes about Minsk and about Belarus. There was it should be the scene when people in Minsk were forcibly called for the 1st May protest, like Labor Day protest, and there was a rain, radioactive rain that time. Unfortunately, it was not in the movie, but the film itself, the TV show, had a huge impact on Belarusians. It was watched, it was discussed, and I still believe that the movie is the strongest arts arts ever, and it's stronger than any other types of art. So Chernobyl in Belarusian language was translated into Belarusian by Austrian A1 telecommunication company. And Austrian telecommunication company, they are on hype, we say, because they realize that now it's a moment of Belarusiization. You can do anything in Belarusian and everyone will love you. So what they did, they translated movies in Belarusian language, they make advertising in Belarusian, and everyone is loving them, praising them for this. So thanks to Austrians, we got some mass culture translated into Belarusian language. In general, many things happened in business. I think business is doing more than embassies in Minsk, more than NGOs, more than cultural initiatives. For example, Latvian company Pols, ice cream producer, White Pols. They produce ice creams, and what they did, they produce ice cream with a taste of corn flour. It's a Belarusian national flour. And they wrote on the package, "Long live Belarus." It's a Belarusian opposition slogan. So they managed to sell 500 or 600,000 ice creams in 2 weeks. That was like never in history. Belarusians ate so much ice cream. So many Belarusians are buying like 20, 30, and 40, So when ice cream was brought to shop, on Twitter, on Instagram, someone wrote about it. All the Minsk went to this shop to buy this ice cream. So that was only for 1 week. Government was upset. Russians were pissed off. So the next party of ice cream was without any long live Belarus and any Belarusian language. But that's very simple gesture by a Latvian company. It made a huge impact, and other businesses began experimenting with this political hype. Other one happened 2 weeks ago. Elon Musk, American inventor. He has cars, Tesla. Yeah, everything, right? Okay, so Lukashenko also has Tesla. And when Lukashenko came to high school, kids asked him, "So, you had Tesla? How did it happen?" And Lukashenko said, "It's Musk gifted me." And someone on Twitter tagged Elon Musk and asked, "Elon, did you gift Tesla to Lukashenko?" And Elon Musk answered in 5 minutes, no. Belarusian clothes producers next day made the t-shirt with the text, no. And that became the symbol of the protest, So I don't know how many thousand they sold these t-shirts, but they used to this moment when all the society discussed, Elon Musk, because it was like Elon Musk protest. Elon Musk proved that Lukashenko is liar. It was a very basic, nothing special, but it was very simple, a clear message, of the entrepreneur against dictator, towards dictator. So people are still wearing this t-shirt, no, and some parliamentary candidates, when they collect signatures now in Minsk downtown, they wear these t-shirts. So it's like a slogan for the campaign. Why Westernization, Belarusiization is so slow? Because of communication, because of media. First of all, state-run media are still pro-Soviet and rather pro-Russian. All the programs are still in the Russian language. Only one TV channel, the less popular, has programs in Belarusian. And it is like a reservation, like ghetto for Belarusian speakers. The main programs are anti-democratic, anti-Western, anti-American. They discussed the publication on Radio Free Europe website, and they said so what would you say about this enemies Radio Free Europe? Something like this, but in stronger words. So they still perceive West and Western media as the enemy. And they transmit this message to thousands and millions of Belarusians through the main TV channels. All these guys on the right, hopefully, luckily he's not on TV anymore. His main narrative and main story was, most popular episode was about rats, that Americans are so hungry that they have to eat rats from the streets. And this episode became very like symbolic, and people still associate, the Belarusian state TV channel with his propagandist programs. He's like Belarusian Kisilov, Solovyov. Second one, we have the rise of IPTV, OTT, this digital TV services like HBO, Netflix, all the services you have. We have Zala, which belongs to a state monopolist for telecommunications, and 35 or 44 main channels in Zala are Russian. And these Russian channels are with Kiselov shows, Solovyov shows, but the most threatening and dangerous are not in news. It is in the TV shows, movies, and comedy club. Comedy club in Russia is very political, and I must say, I think political and anti-Western messages are coded there. And we have to pay particular attention, monitor these informations as well, not only this Kiselov news, because we are always monitoring only the main sources, and we do not go to these hidden channels of propaganda. And even Russian liberal media, which are very popular in Belarus, Dozhd, TV Rain, Kommersant, Novaya Gazeta. For example, Dozhd, just a recent example, they made the movie about the Brest, Belarusian city in the West, and all this movie is from Russian perspective. Polskie pany, Polish nobility, Lithuanian warriors, and Russian liberators. So even liberal media, they still perceive Belarus as the part of Russian sphere of influence. And Navalny, who is perceived as the opposition leader in Russia, as the liberal leader in Russia, he also made statements which are quite chauvinistic and aggressive and not friendly towards Belarusian identity and language. Trends in media space. I know we have limited time, so I will switch. So what to do? I also will skip it. So, because we have only 10 minutes left, so I will skip to this slide. So that's like recommendations, roadmap, scenario. What we can do. So we are now in the very beginning, on the very first stage. We are not on Russification, on Belarusization. All these events I showed, I presented, they are very facade. They do not change the system. The values, institution, bureaucracy, education are still the same. That's the hybrid Soviet-Russian model. What we need now, when we have US ambassador there, when we have the window of opportunities, no political prisoners, NGOs can gather people and organize demonstrations and gather signatures for presidential or parliamentary candidates. We have to use this moment of opportunity and to expand the space for public debate, discussion on the identity, who we are, what we want, what is our real history. When we will be able to expand this space, to create NGOs, to create more space for media, not only for creating new media, but for media distribution. And then we can go to the second stage, which is desovietization. Desovietization means symbolic things like toponymies, names of the cities, names of the rivers, names of the streets. They're still full of KGB officers and Soviet Russian heroes. We have to think about education system. Education system, for example, now they signed the agreement with the Bologna process, but Belarusian school system is Soviet, so they are not able to synchronize, to consolidate Bologna demands for the exchanges and the Soviet Belarusian schools. So basically, still Belarusian kids cannot go for exchange to European universities, and it will not be so it could be counted as their education process. The Russification. So here we have to decrease the discourse in mass media and mass culture. We still live in the world of Philip Kirkorov and Alla Pugacheva. Not only we, I think Moldovans, Ukrainians, Armenians, Kazakhs, they have the same trouble. And in order to decrease, we have to increase the Western presence. For example, Netflix, which is still very niche service in the post-Soviet countries, it doesn't want to translate its TV shows into local languages. Google doesn't support Belarusian, Macedonian, Kazakh, Uzbek, so you cannot promote videos in these languages. So what we have to do in order to de-Russify, we have to provide alternative, which is the access to the Western culture. And that can be done through the public diplomacy, but also through the collaboration with the private sector. When we are... the Russification is also about regional integration. So what Russians and the Kremlin hates when Belarus, Ukraine, Lithuania, Poland work together. So they hate any common celebration, any common events, any common activities. For example, when this battalion named after Ostroshky, Konstantin Ostroshky, that's like the military unit by Lithuanians, Ukrainians, was created, Russia was pissed off. Unfortunately, Belarus was not involved in the creation of this military unit, but it should be there. And these symbolic messages, symbolic things like regional integration, they can serve as the antidote as well. We have Grand Duchy of Lithuania, we have Rzeczpospolita, we have even longer history of collaboration of the trade, this trade path from the Vikings to Greeks. All this past can be used in order to shape alternative narratives and unifying messages to the people of the region. So we should perceive Belarus as the part of the narrower region, Eastern Central Europe region, and the broader, which is like European Western civilization. Belarusization, which is following next, that's about support national identity. Many people say that why you need Belarus language or culture, we are living in the world of globalization. But globalization really works if it unites people, societies with established identities. Then globalization works perfectly and then people feel equally. Otherwise, globalization destroys the differences and allows stronger nations with stronger identity to manipulate weaker. So it doesn't create equal opportunities. So we need Belarus language in schools, informal and formal education about the culture, about the national hero, and again, cinema. Translation of films, movies, content for kids, for seniors, mass content, computer games, in Belarusian language. We are still are victim of this post-colonial past. For example, when the Hollywood is selling licenses to post-Soviet Union, CIS region. This is the region we belong. Belarus doesn't exist as the subject. We belong to CIS, post-Soviet countries. And they sell license to Moscow, and Moscow gives licenses to Minsk for the movies and for TV shows. And this is why we don't have access to political content sometimes. And some movies are prohibited in Russia and prohibited in Belarus. This is why. And Westernization. This is more about messaging. Economical collaboration, exchanges, visa-free regime. These are non-cultural things, but they can serve as the cultural, psychological messages to the society. That we are part of the civilization, we are wanted, we are expected to be members of the European Union, maybe somehow one day. Eastern Partnership was not successful because it didn't guarantee any clear membership perspective. And projects like Eastern Partnership can be revised and relaunched, but promising something bigger, which the nations will appreciate. I'm open to your questions. We have very limited time. I think maximum 10 minutes, perhaps. The host will let us have. So, any questions, please? Yes, Christina.
So, as you know, I spent a lot of time in Ukraine and Georgia, and I noticed with Yandex Taxi, it's available in Georgia. There is no Uber. In Ukraine, it's vice versa. I know, as you said, that was a decision from Uber and Yandex, but also what role, if any, do the governments of those countries play in that decision?
I don't know. I don't know. Is it on what level these negotiations are happening usually? I'm sure for Yandex can make a deal which you cannot refuse. So basically, they are buying exclusive right to create monopoly for the specific region in the country. So Lyft or Bolt, smaller players, they're not able to make the global network of the services. And Yandex has enough power, enough resources, enough money to do this. And this is why Yandex just eliminate the biggest competitor, and other smaller competitors even don't try to go there. So Bolt exists in Georgia, I think.
In both countries.
But in Armenia, for example, GG, the local taxi provider, shared taxi provider, it almost disappears because it lost to damped. It is losing to damped policies of Yandex Taxi. So I think corporations like Google, they can, and I assume they do, collaborate with the Russian government, because Russian government gave the deadline, and they want foreign companies to host, to save all the information on Russian servers. This is the same what Chinese did a long time ago. And for the last few months, I'm fighting with the Google Moscow office for language, for support of smaller languages on YouTube. And they talk to me as Governor General of Muravyev. We don't care. We do not support. Yeah, you can complain. Yeah, please write us, but we can't do anything about this. And they are making like hee-hee-ha-ha of me. And unfortunately for me, it was, and all the letters to the central office, to California, didn't help. So it made me feel like they are given carte blanche to build special relationship with Kremlin, special deals and special models of collaboration. Because Google doesn't want to lose a Russian market. It's almost, Russian-speaking market, it's almost like 250 million users. And they are still leading there. Yandex has less than 40% on the market. Google still has more than 55% in Russia. So of course they can make deals, and what we can do here, we must take Western companies on our side, Western for-profit companies on our side, otherwise we will lose. And it's about Facebook, it's about Google, it's about Amazon, it's about Netflix. These companies, they don't care yet, but you see after hearing in Congress, Mark Zuckerberg changed his mind. And he put a lot of efforts and some money too into social responsibility projects, like Facebook news projects, like news curators, moderation. So I think, if we put more pressure, plus can build some more trustful relationship with them, it could help us a lot to counter and resist Russian revanchism, chauvinism, and also Chinese and Iranian malinfluence. Yes, please.
Carl Alto, the Joint Baltic American National Committee. Just to add a little perspective, Estonians also really love Latvian ice cream. Usually the first word in Estonian we'll learn in Latvian is the word for ice cream. So, but I know China really was in the purview of your discussion today, but what about competition between China and Russia in Belarus, soft power competition and so on?
Oh, that's a good. I think that's a very good question. So China is publicly present in all spheres of Belarusian life. First of all, they got exclusive contract for Beltelecom production and development. It's a monopolist of telecommunications. So they build smart houses now with Huawei equipment. So all the new buildings in Belarus can include smart homes. You know smart homes? You know, this video cameras, observation, smart refrigerators, and all this stuff. So Huawei got exclusive right to build this infrastructure. So it's not only about smart homes, it's also about 5G. So 5G is tested in Belarus since January. China has working great stone park of technologies near Minsk airport, where thousands of Chinese bright minds are building better future of Belarus. In many people, actually that's my personal observation, many students, young people, they know Chinese language better than English. Because a big part, I think more, I don't know exactly the percentage, but many schools in Minsk, they give China, they are like China first foreign language model. And it's getting more and more. So I think China perceives Belarus as this base, temporary or maybe constantly permanent base for deeper involvement or participation in other European countries. I think Chinese presence in Belarus is the biggest and highest among all post-Soviet countries except Central Asia. Of course, Central Asia is leading this. Kazakhstan is, I think, half of Kazakhstan is already somehow influenced by Chinese capital. So, and also, you know, on this, you know, daily things, you know, we see Chinese around us. In the airport, when you arrive, the first you don't see Belarusian or Russian language, you see Chinese language. So it's strange, it's weird, but we are very close to perceive it as normality. But values and this ideological component, I think we must be aware primarily and care about Russians because of the religion, because of the common history. China does not pretend to influence Belarusian identity or to substitute Belarusian language. Their goal is geopolitical economic control. And this is what they do perfectly worldwide, especially in Africa, developing markets, Southeast Asia, South Asia as well. And then the West doesn't have solution on this, as I know. Yes, please.
So I had a question about internet content. You mentioned that more content is necessary for this cultural aspect to kind of develop. So kind of how good are the security mechanisms in Belarus? Does this content have to be internal? Does this content have to be external? But could you maybe mention a few things about these parameters of how to get content into Belarus or how to produce it internally? I don't know if you have any thoughts as to...
I understood. So Belarus doesn't produce much content. So usually it consumes Russian. When you speak about audiovisual, multimedia content or information, so usually it is consumer of Russian media space. Russian Yandex Zen, Yandex News, Megogo, which is Ukrainian, but Megogo is consisted as well consists of Russian films, movies, and TV programs. So what we can do, we need to export more content from the West to Belarus. We just have to inflate Belarus with Western content. And the basic thing we have to do before to translate it to clear, understandable language. And if we translate it to Belarusian language, we solve two problems. Building national identity, we are strengthening the resistance to Russian culture, to Russian influence, malinfluence, and we expose them to other narratives, other ideas. And it works both with serious political content or news content, analytics, and entertainment. So what we lack in Belarus is infotainment, edutainment, all the content that can help us reach young people and seniors. Very low media literacy. Digital literacy is quite good, is quite high, but people don't know, can't differentiate sources can't check information, they don't know why they shouldn't care about fake news, etc. So all these basic things, which are like pretty obvious here, they're very new to Belarus. Media literacy became the topic in Belarus only like last year, when even on the government level, ministries and Lukashenko's administration began talking about fake news. But for them, fake news, like Lukashenko's ideologist, like a few days ago there was a program, fake news, that social networks. So you shouldn't go to social networks, because there are a lot of fake news. So for them, basically, fake news, it's everything which is against them. Yes.
I have a question, please.
I have a question about, have you seen the data, public opinion data from young people in Belarus? Are they associating themselves more with Russia or Western societies? Is there any shifts that you see because of events in Ukraine or anything where young people they have more access to internet? They try to understand a little bit the events and maybe they want to travel west more. So have you seen anything in the data? Sure.
Even I have even slides about it. So Levada Center made very great research on Belarusian youth under 35, asking them about political views, geopolitical preferences, future of Belarus, values. So it's the same polarized as all other social demographic groups in Belarus. So until now, till now, Russia is the closest friend. Russia is the closest. So the question was posed like this: which country Belarus should orient on? Yeah. And Russia still has like 20-25%. But also Germany is high. United States is not very high, but there is Lithuania in the top, Poland in the top. There is no Ukraine because of different reasons. People are afraid of the same scenario in Belarus. So, but I think more and more Belarusians feel any good things about communism. They don't affiliate themselves with the Soviet leaders. They don't know who is Lenin. They travel a lot. This is why there is a big distance between the current Lukashenko's elites and young people, who basically don't understand, don't remember how Lukashenko came to power, and don't remember life before him. So for him, Lukashenko is like the old guy, who is there, who is like the rain, who is like the weather. You cannot influence him. He's just existing. He's somewhere outside. I cannot change it. But I'm pretty optimistic, thanks to the social networks, internet, travels, foreigners coming to Belarus. Now foreigners can stay in Belarus up to 30 days. That increase communication, connections between people. I hope for the US Embassy, which will be reopened this next year, and which can have a lot of events, programs, projects within Belarus, and it's a great window of opportunity to make US present in the country and make real change there. Thank you. Thank you so much for attending.